Great. Well, I'm so excited about this, you guys. Welcome to Optimizing Nutrition for Thyroid and Gut Health. Josh and I are very excited about this. We have been putting together an online course about thyroid and gut health and exposing the root cause of your thyroid and gut health symptoms. But what we wanted to do for this webinar was provide you guys, practitioners, or anybody who just deals with frustrating thyroid and gut health problems, we wanted to give you the knowledge, the strategies, the tools, and the confidence to understand what's going on and to be able to take your health back into your own hands or help your patients take their health back into their own hands. So Josh and I both wanted to make sure before we start this, we just give you a quick rundown on who we are, what we do, and then we can dive into the webinar. And just so you guys know, the CEUs, we will email those out with everything that you need with this certification after the webinar. You probably give us like 2 weeks. So Dasha, do you want to start?
Sure thing. I am a graduate of Tufts University. I got my master's in nutritional epidemiology, and right now I'm pursuing my RD credentials at the Veterans Hospital down in Tampa, and I'm excited. I've been doing coaching for about 5 years for exercise, and I'm a personal trainer, but gut health is what my true passion is and what my thesis was on somewhat in my graduate studies. So looking forward to sharing with you guys what we found.
Yeah, very excited. Okay. Hey, y'all. My name is Lacey Dunn. I am a dietitian out of Houston, Texas. I got my master's degree and did my dietetic internship at Texas Women's University. Love them. Best dietetic internship ever. So shout out to Karen Moreland. She was amazing. But anyways, I focus on both. I do everything. I love everything. I love thyroid and gut health, but hormones, ladies, women's health, and then bodybuilding and physique development is definitely where my passions lie. So I'm one of those dietitians that I like to dabble a little bit into everything. I'm a virtual dietitian. I work out of Houston. But for the most part, that's about me. I'm a crazy cat lady. My cat is actually being a crazy person right now. What are you doing, honey? Playing like normal, but I'm really excited to share my knowledge. I actually have hypothyroidism, and I have personally gone through the crazy frustrations with doctors saying, oh, you're fine, even though you feel like crap and your labs, they didn't even check all your labs. So for the most part, if anybody's going through thyroid issues, I know what you're going through. There's a light. You just have to be your own advocate for your own health. So I'm stoked about this. And yeah, we can get started.
Ooh, let's get started.
All right. I am going to now turn off the video function because I will stare at myself the whole entire time. I apologize. And if anybody has any questions, we are going to do a Q&A at the end. And feel free to chat or such during this and talk to each other. I'm all about us helping each other and helping to better understand what's going on, okay? Because the thyroid is quite complex. Are there slide handouts for note-taking? Not at this time, unfortunately. I'm so sorry, but we will send out these slides to you guys, okay? So again, these slides are adapted from our upcoming course, Exposing the Root Cause of Your Thyroid and Your Gut Health. So first off, we need to actually figure out what is the thyroid. So the thyroid is essentially like the powerhouse of the cell or the thermostat of your body. It tells your body to either decrease functions such as heart rate, blood pressure, energy, or gut motility, or decrease them. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland found at the base of the neck, just below the larynx. It is in charge of fueling almost every cell function in the body, from metabolism, mood, cognition, hormones, to growth and repair. So, what is very important with this is if your thyroid is low, then you're not going to have energy. You're not going to have optimal hormones or reproduction or gut health. And we need to make sure that we understand this, because for the most part, our patients, they deal with not feeling good. Dasha,
do you need my
somebody, I think somebody, I'm so sorry. I think somebody,
like I should be able to
can you
hear
guys
him
take
talk.
your mic off, please? I think somebody entered and turned their mic on. Well, how does the thyroid work? Well, our thyroid, it releases 4 types of hormones: T1, T2, T3, and T4. So the main thyroid hormone is T4, which converts into T3. Our thyroid also produces calcitonin. Somebody says they cannot hear. So moving on, T4, thyroxine, is essentially thyroglobulin plus 4 iodine atoms. That is the inactive form. That converts, whether that be in the gut or in the tissues, to T3, which is our active form of our thyroid hormone. In order for the work of the thyroid to happen, T4 must be converted to T3. And there are a variety of things that can inhibit that conversion, and we'll dive deeper into that, but things like cortisol, poor gut health, nutrition deficiencies, infection, environmental toxins. So there's a lot of things that can affect that conversion. Now, the travel form of the thyroid hormone is thyroid binding globulin. So to kind of explain what thyroid binding globulin is, it's kind of like when a car is trying to leave and go to its destination. But when it's bound, it has a boot on it. So think of the thyroid binding globulin like the boot. So if there's a boot on the car, then the thyroid hormone can't be used. The car can't go anywhere. So hopefully that helps. Now, T3 is only about 7 to 20% of the total thyroid production. And then T4 is about 80 to 93%. So remember this, because if most of the T4 is being produced, but we need T3 to be active, that means that conversion is one of the most important things with thyroid health. You have to have optimal conversion, okay? So too little thyroid binding globulin can induce hyperthyroidism, meaning there's more free thyroid hormone, and then too much thyroid binding globulin can mean there's hypothyroidism, so there's less free thyroid hormone. And what I do tend to see many times is with the hypothyroidism and the too much of thyroid binding globulin, people have too much estrogen, because this can increase thyroid binding globulin. Okay, so another thing to just note is calcitonin is secreted by the thyroid when high calcium levels are found in the blood, and this inhibits release of calcium from the bone. Okay, so moving on. Why does this even matter? Well, as we said, the thyroid is basically the thermostat and in control of every single function in your body. So you have to have enough of it if you want to thrive. So I know a lot of people with their patients, your patients, they deal with weight loss issues. So if you do not have adequate thyroid levels, then of course you're not going to be able to lose weight. Another thing to keep in mind is low T3 can cause growth and development issues, lowered heart rate and cardiac output, the decreased metabolism because it lowers fat mobilization and carb metabolism, and it decreases protein synthesis. We have then decreased mental clarity and activity, the low reproductive hormones, and the low body temperature. In regards to gut health specifically, which we're going to dive into later, you have less stomach acid production, less bile production, less digestive enzyme production, slowed gut motility, and a slowed migrating motor complex. So this heavily increases your risk for infections and overgrowth, such as SIBO or Candida. Another thing to keep in mind, like I said, with the high estrogen levels can prevent the sphincter of Oddi from releasing those bile acids and the pancreatic enzymes. So there's a lot of things that can go on, but thyroid health matters, guys. The thyroid is in control of basically everything. The powerhouse of the cell. Alrighty. So what is hypothyroidism? Well, to make it short and simple, hypothyroidism is decreased activity of the thyroid gland, which can affect your whole entire body. So when we think of thyroid problems, there is hypothyroidism, which can be either primary, secondary, or it can be autoimmune related. So hypothyroidism that is primary just means that it is the thyroid itself that's the issue. If it's secondary hypothyroidism, that means that it's not essentially the thyroid that's going wrong. It's something like your brain or like your hypothalamus, or it could be your pituitary that's the issue, or it could be your hypothalamic pituitary axis. So it just means that it's not the thyroid itself. Now, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the autoimmune disease, which is hypothyroidism, but autoimmune related. So in this, we see flares of Hashimoto's, of that hypothyroidism, and it's basically because the body is attacking its own thyroid tissue, creating that hypothyroidism. So think of autoimmunity like a car race. There's a trigger that leads to damage of your thyroid cells. So let's pretend the trigger, aka a thief, takes away money from the bank, and the bank is destroyed, aka your thyroid is destroyed. Well, the bank sends out a signal to the police, aka hypothalamus, that something is wrong. Immune cells, aka the cops, they come in and they strive to save your bank, aka your thyroid. Well, the bank can either be continued to be destroyed by the thieves, or it can stay in signal mode as the cops don't know what's going on. Or it can be resolved when the cops catch the thief. However, once the damage is done to the bank, that can't be reversed. So that is how I like to describe Hashimoto's. The bank is completely destroyed for some people. And for many times, too, the cops can come in and save the day, and then there is not too much damage to the bank, aka the thyroid. So hopefully that is understandable and that helps some of you guys. So hypothyroidism affects 1 in 10 women. It's a common condition seen in about 2 to 7% of adults in the U.S. As subclinical hypothyroidism, which essentially means that TSH is mildly elevated or normal, and there's slightly normal or decreased thyroid levels. Now, the reason this is important is because many doctors in the conventional world will just look at TSH. Well, that's a pituitary marker that does not tell you anything about what the active thyroid or even the serum thyroid levels are in your blood. So when it comes down to lab testing, you have to do a full panel. TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, even more than that for nutrition deficiencies, okay? Hashimoto's, the autoimmune form, it affects women 10 times more than men. So keep that in mind, because you might, if you have patients, you might see a lot of women come to you with Hashimoto's. Now, Hashimoto's can be distinguished by thyroid peroxidase and antithyroglobulin levels, aka TPOAB or TGAAB levels. So okay. Now, the genetic risk factors for Hashimoto's include autoimmune conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, endometriosis, lupus, even though there's even more things like infections that can affect it. MTHFR enzyme mutation, which basically means decreased methylation in the body, and then genetic SNPs. So signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism, there's a lot. I'm not going to read these straight off these slides, but just keep in mind that with the goiter, the swelling of the thyroid gland, this is not found in all cases, okay? So the weight gain results from reduction in the metabolism and alterations in the hormone levels. Mood changes can be due to shift in serotonin or hormones, as well as nutrition deficiencies. Fatigue is due to less ATP production in the cells, aka production of the energy. We see intolerance to cold due to changes in thermogenesis. We see body temperature, which may drop, and this increases sensitivity to the cold. We also have those digestive issues that I mentioned earlier, such as the decreased production of the digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, or slowed peristalsis in the GI tract. Okay, and now we're continuing to what really matters, nutrition for thyroid health. How are you guys doing so far? Everybody doing good? Awesome. Okay. Nutrient depletions. This matters so much because if you do not have adequate nutrients, then that conversion is not going to happen from the T4 to the T3. And of course, then we're putting you at risk for whether it be brittle nails, hair loss, loss of your menstrual cycle, all that stuff. So there's a lot of different things that can affect your body and cause nutrient depletions. Now, in the course, we're going to dive heavily into this and the reasons and the things to look out for, whether that be specific medications like PPIs or birth control pills or antidepressants. So we're going to dive all into that in the course, but I'm going to give you guys a general overview. So things like low stomach acid, that is going to reduce and lead to deficiencies in B12, vitamin C, calcium, and iron, okay? What we see is very much so, especially with people who are, so I don't know if you practitioners are, going through this a lot, but I see a lot of vegan and vegetarian clients. And for some reason, there's a connection with those clients who end up having Hashimotos. So common deficiencies that I can see with this are low B12, iron, calcium, zinc, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids. So something to heavily keep in mind with people who come to you with Hashimoto's who are either vegan or vegetarian. Always make sure you ask. A lot of people, they won't tell you that they tried doing vegan or vegetarian for a few months, but always got to ask. Another thing, of course, we know with the standard American diet is it tends to be high in refined grains, vegetable oils, processed meats, and then, of course, low in our fruits and vegetables and whole grains. So that means that we're going to have decreased antioxidant and phytonutrients and polyphenols, and we're going to have trouble fighting free radicals, and we're going to have nutrition deficiencies, okay? Now, another thing that I see specifically in my clients is poor liver health. So poor liver health will alter the conversion of T4 to T3, and it also can reduce the ability to produce bile, which is important in cholesterol synthesis and absorption, and nutrient transport and absorption. So then we have further nutrition deficiencies happening. Now, just to keep in mind I'm going to give you guys just a little tidbit, a little bit of taste of the medications that can cause nutrition deficiencies. We have an example in SSRI, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are used for anxiety and depressions. And these medications can decrease the amount of CoQ10 and vitamin D in the body. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, of course, birth control can create changes in your gut microbiome and your gut lining. And this can actually increase thyroid binding globulin, and it can influence your thyroid activity. And it also depletes the body of folate, magnesium, zinc, and B vitamins. Okay, so how to fix these nutrient depletions? Well, first off, it's figuring out what are the nutrient depletions that you or your patient has, and then fixing them from there. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to say, hey, I potentially have all of these nutrition depletions, so I'm just going to throw everything into the mix. No, please don't do that. You really have to make sure that you are going to the root cause. You are figuring out what are my depletions, what can I do to fix them? So that's why a comprehensive assessment is essential. I like to start off with making sure that people have enough stomach acid, enough digestive enzymes. So for the most part, I do like to say add in a digestive enzyme complex. I'm a huge fan of now digestive enzymes because it has the amylases, the proteases, and the lipases, and it's really cheap, and they are GMP manufacturing checked. So definitely that's awesome. Some nutrients that you really need to make sure that are gotten by your patients or you are iodine, and that's because it's a building block of your thyroid, selenium, which is involved in T4 to T3 conversion, B vitamins, which are involved in the production of your thyroid, zinc, which is involved in the T4 to T3 conversion, iron, which is involved in iodide going to iodine, as well as T4 to T3 conversion, and then vitamin D. And vitamin D is I see it so low in so many people. So I just like to say, always check vitamin D. I don't care who they are. Check their vitamin D. They can be out in the sun 24/7. Check their vitamin D. I cut off. Can you guys still hear me? I hope so. Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Moving on. So what is the hypothyroid diet? Well, to make it short, and I apologize, you guys, for this if I'm sarcastic or direct or whatever. I'm just sick of the bull crap. So there is no hypothyroid diet. There is no hypothyroid diet. The hypothyroid diet is going to be different per individual. So whether that's eliminating, reducing, or increasing amounts of foods, it's going to be what is best for that person. I do see and find that most people with Hashimotos specifically need to eliminate gluten, soy, dairy, and wheat. Of course, trans fats, but this is because of what's called molecular mimicry. And we will dive even more into this, into the course, but basically it means that the body produces antibodies and thinks that this food is causing attack of their thyroid. So it creates attack of the thyroid, So not everybody responds this way, but that's why it's all about individuality. For the most part, we know for everybody to reduce refined grains, added sugars, processed vegetable oils, the whole shebang. And then, of course, increase the amounts of antioxidants, polyphenols, flavonoids, all that in our diets, okay? Now, we all know the types of dietary fat, so I'm going to skip over this. But for the most part, I just want to say make sure that people know the types of dietary fats and that they're getting a well-rounded diet in their types of fats. We want to make sure that we reduce inflammation. So really focusing on a 2-to-1 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fats is going to be important. Oh, and also, a lot of people are afraid of saturated fat these days. So just make sure you educate your clients or you educate yourself, whoever is watching this webinar. Saturated fats are not the devil. It's all about the whole balance of your diet. What are healthy fats? Well, all fats in moderation to me are healthy, but these are my favorite healthy fats. Fats to limit, we know processed vegetable oils, especially at high heat, this is going to cause oxidation and free radical damage. Inflammation, we don't want to do that, okay? I do suggest red meats to be reduced based on cancer risk, and I know there's updated information. There's a lot of hoopla. There's a lot of confusion and back-to-back bickery, basically. But for the most part, my opinion says reduce red meat consumption. I do see that also it's harder for some people to digest with hypothyroidism. Now, oils and temperatures, this matters because if you are having an oil that is going to be, that goes under lipid lipid peroxidation, aka it goes above the smoke point, that is going to lead to oxidation of those fatty acids, which leads to free radical production, which leads to inflammation, which leads to carcinogens being developed, and that can actually even be a trigger for things like Hashimoto. So something to keep in mind. All right, so I just discussed this. If you're not cooking at high heat, the smoke point doesn't matter, but just don't cook on high heat with like extra virgin olive oil. Yes, olive oil is a great monounsaturated fat, but we don't want to have that at high heat because then it's just going to be not good for us. Okay. So what is best for optimizing thyroid health? We want to remove the foods, ingredients that disrupt thyroid function, the food intolerances, and then all that inflammation. So like I said, it can be gluten, soy, dairy. These are things that I commonly see, but each person might actually have their own food intolerances. So that's where it's going to be very much person by person dependent. Okay, so you're going to really want to focus on making sure that your patients or you have adequate micronutrients. You're taking control of their diet and using the 4R program to heal the gut. And then I really do like to say, focus on an anti-inflammatory diet. So focusing on foods that are rich in antioxidants, like fruits, whether it be berries, apples, green tea, dark chocolate and spinach, vegetables like cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, and cauliflower, specifically because those cruciferous vegetables will aid in reducing inflammation and oxidative stress and helping with natural liver detoxification. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we get enough adequate omega-3s because they function as eicosanoids, which serves as mediators and precursors to prostaglandins, thromboxans, and leukotrienes, aka anti-inflammatory. Another thing to keep in mind is, I do see this more common nowadays, is thyroid patients can heavily be intolerant to histamines. And then when they have high histamine foods like eggs or aged cheeses or alcohol, they have a huge exacerbation of their thyroid symptoms, whether it be brain fog, joint pain, muscle aches, all that. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So why focus on gut health? Well, basically 90% of our serotonin is made in the gut, and we have a heavy amount of T4 to T3 conversion happening in our gut, as well as our liver. So that's why we need to really make sure that we have adequate liver and thyroid health, okay? Poor gut health also leads to leaky gut, aka intestinal permeability, poor digestion and absorption of nutrients, mood issues, etc. So the gut is very important, and also is very important for immunity. So if you have poor gut health, then you are increasing your risk for infections, overgrowth, mood disorders, hormone problems, everything. So make sure you take care of your gut. Now, what is the 4R approach? I know I mentioned it. Well, basically, the 4R approach is removing the bad, replacing the good, re-inoculating, and then repairing. This has to be done in steps, okay? So just to give a brief overview, we want to remove allergies, intolerances, and infections. So specifically like killing yeast or SIBO with antimicrobials, or doing the low FODMAP diet with something like an antibiotic. I do find, and based on the literature, getting rid of SIBO, it is very much, it responds better to antimicrobials than rifaximin. So replacing, we mean replacing things like hydrochloric acid, digestive enzymes, or pancreatic enzymes, or bile acids. So you could do things like ox bile. Re-inoculating. So we want to make sure first, though, we remove the intolerances and infections, replacing the enzymes or the bile acids that we need. Then we re-inoculate after we get rid of things like overgrowth. So you don't want to add in a probiotic if there's an overgrowth, okay? I love the 50 billion from Renew Life Ultimate Flora. I love Espellardi specifically because Espellardi will help actually repair the gut lining as well. And then Megaspore will do the same thing. So those are my top probiotics that I like to suggest. You can also add in some fermented foods like kefir or yogurt, sauerkraut, or kimchi. So those are just some things to keep in mind. When it comes to repairing, you want to repair the gut lining. So we want to stop that intestinal permeability from happening. So adding things in like glutamine or bone broth, collagen, aloe, or zinc carnosine. And then, of course, that Espellardi and the Megaspore will help in that as well. Now, I do like adding a fifth. So make it a 5R approach. You can always soothe the gut. No matter what, you can soothe the gut. So doing things like bone broth, glutamine, aloe, ginger, or marshmallow root are very helpful to do that. So, common Hashimoto's diets. I know that there are so many that are listed out there, and so many of my patients come to me, they're like, oh my God, what do I eat? And I'm like, okay, well, first off, you are your own person, and you don't need to follow a quote unquote Hashimoto's diet, because there is nobody exactly like you with your exact symptoms and your exact metabolism and your exact thyroid hormone and your exact digestion. So please do not follow Hashimoto's diets. You have to work with your client, patient, or work with yourself. If you're watching this for yourself, figure out what needs to be removed specifically for you. What needs to be added in specifically for you. If it's not an issue for you, then don't remove it. I know some people that do just fine. They have Hashimoto's, but they can handle a little bit of sprouted grains. They can handle a little bit of gluten. So somebody going and trying to go gluten-free, that, might really help them, but somebody else might be able to handle a little bit of gluten. And why restrict somebody's diet if you don't need to? I'm all about living life. So if you don't need to restrict and be sad, then don't be. Okay. I'm not going to dive too much in this slide because I think I'm going to go over Dasha's time, but gluten and grains. So gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. It can cause, for some, autoimmune attack and thyroid destruction via that cellular mimicry. We need carbs for T4 to T3 conversion. So that's why I do not suggest a low carb or a keto diet for anybody with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's. I see a lot these days with that. No, you need carbs for that conversion, okay? What's really important, specifically with people who have Hashimoto's, is having cortisol imbalances can create that Hashimoto's to be exacerbated. And when you have cortisol imbalances, that can be either induced or can create blood sugar swings. So that's why it's really important to have, to really focus on that blood sugar balance throughout the day. Okay. So that means consistent meals, having smart snacks, which means basically having at least 2 macro components in that snack. So something like a protein and a carbohydrate, or a carbohydrate and a fat. So that will really help with blood sugar regulation, as well as not skipping meals. Oh, and just so anybody who doesn't know, the symptoms of low blood sugar are shakiness, anxiety, exhaustion, hunger, irritability, or what I like to call being hangry on steroids. It's basically your body screaming out, I need fuel. So that would be what we want to avoid. Now, I get this question a lot. Do I need to ditch the dairy? We'll go even further into all this in the course, but for the most part, remove dairy if it creates you issues or if it creates your patient issues. There are things to keep in mind, such as the type of casein or the type of whey or the source of the dairy. So some people can handle organic, some people can't. Some people can handle beta casein, some alpha casein, some can handle whey versus casein. Some people, so that's what I mean. It's very much so person by person dependent. Some people, it's just lactose intolerance. They can handle dairy if there's no lactose. Some people, it's the full dairy and it's the actual dairy protein. So there's a difference between having an allergy or intolerance to lactose or the actual protein itself. All righty. So that was thyroid. I hope that was helpful. I hope it gave you guys some answers. When it comes down to working with patients or working with yourself, it's all about fixing the root cause. So you can tackle nutrition. You can make sure you're fixing nutrition deficiencies, digestive deficiencies. But if you are not fixing the actual root cause, whether that be infection, environmental toxin, overgrowth, cortisol imbalances, NTHFR enzyme that you're not properly fixing, hormonal imbalances, whether that's too high of estrogen or low estrogen, if you're not fixing the root cause, you're not going to fix the thyroid. Okay. So you really have to make sure you're tackling everything at all angles that you can, and then making sure that you are properly looking at lab testing. So like I said, TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, looking at all the nutrition deficiencies that can happen. So it's very, very important. Thank you guys so much. This was Lacey Dunn, MSRD, LD, CPT, Crazy Cat Lady. Thank you guys so much for your time. And I'm going to let Dasha take the reins now.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to take over and start talking about how nutrition affects the gut. Lacey, you're going to have to move the slides for me because I don't have control over
Yes. So too much thyroid binding globulin, that is what will essentially cause the thyroid to be bound and not be able to flow through the body, reach your tissues, and be absorbed by the cell. So too much thyroid binding globulin means less in the serum, less active. Too little, we can hear you. Lacey, we can hear you. I hope. Okay. Too little thyroid binding globulin means there's more in the serum, aka in hyperthyroidism.
Oh, sorry. I thought you.
All right, Dasha, you can take the reins.
Okay, can you take over the slides?
Oh, you want me to click through them when you go?
Yeah, because I don't have access to click through them. I'm only a viewer.
Yes, ma'am. I got you.
All right, let's start us off then. First slide. So a lot of times I've seen people talk about dysbiosis or leaky gut. So I wanted to start off by first making sure that we understand what the difference is between the two. So leaky gut has to do more with the permeability of the gut lining, right? What passes through the gut lining. Dysbiosis, on the other hand, is more, think about it internally within the intestinal system. It has to do with the imbalance of healthy and unhealthy bacteria within the gut. So, for example, you may have dysbiosis, but you may not have leaky gut. Your gut lining is as a result protecting you from the harmful bacteria that are overgrowing within your gut. So you may have dysbiosis, not leaky gut. But on the other hand, it's not really going to protect you. That lining isn't going to protect you from the harmful bacteria that's overgrowing in your gut and causing modulation there. That overgrowth, the dysbiosis, it's likely going to cause you inflammation and in time will contribute to leaky gut. So you can think about it as dysbiosis can cause leaky gut, but the two terms are describing two independent mechanisms of action. So there are two factors that thus determine how pathogenic an organism can become, right? So it'll be first, how able is this pathogen to accumulate within the intestine and cause dysbiosis, and also how able is it to pass through the intestinal wall. Can someone mute themselves? I think it might be Sahari. I can hear a child talking to whoever's on there. Okay, hopefully that helped it. Okay, so again, just to recap, the first factor is the ability for a bacteria to overgrow and produce toxins that can injure us within the intestines, and the second is the ability of it to pass through the lining, so the strength of our immune defense. Think of that as the leaky gut, the second one. So dysbiosis, as I said, it's the imbalance of good and bad bacteria within the gut. It's associated with infection, vitamin B12 deficiency, decreased digestive enzymes, and so much more. It is associated with numerous amounts of diseases, ranging from obesity to type 2 diabetes to anxiety, depression disorders, things like that. So enough about dysbiosis. Let's go on to the next slide about fats. So let's go into the specific macronutrients that each individually affect the gut. The main point of this slide is just to showcase this study, which I go more into it in the course itself, but the main idea is that the human gut is extremely complex, right? There's studies that try and describe the effects of dietary modulation. They're not perfect, and I honestly don't know if they ever will be. This one, for example, created a human gut simulator in vitro, which I thought was really cool and innovative, but they took different pHs to represent different parts of the stomach and digestion and put the diet, quote unquote, through this in vitro simulator. And what they did was they did the Western diet and compared it to just a high-fat diet that's completely lacking in carbs and proteins. And of course, this caused a shift in the microbiome. You have to remember that anything you eat feeds the bacteria that are housed within our gut. So if you completely take out all the carbs and proteins, you're completely taking out all the bacteria that thrive on these things. So, of course, replacing a Western diet with a full-fat diet caused a shift in the microbiome that may disrupt the vagal gut-brain communication they then would assume, because any changes that you produce in the microbiome will have long-term effects throughout the system, right? Whether that be just, again, the dysbiosis or the leaky gut, or then affecting our brain function and producing symptoms within the body and in the mind, like brain fog, anxiety, depression. So let's go more into the specific types of fats. When I just talked about completely replacing the Western diet with the, Lacey, can you move to the next slide? Thank you. When I previously talked about completely replacing a Western diet with just fats, that's different than a ketogenic diet. So a ketogenic diet will still have the carbohydrates a little tiny bit and the proteins low to moderate amounts. So a ketogenic diet actually induced microbiota changes that reduced pro-inflammatory microbes. And you're probably thinking, okay, what, Dasha? This is the exact opposite of what you just said. And the reasons why the author thinks this is that it's due to the variety of fatty acid chain lengths that are found in the ketogenic diet. So in the previous study I just talked about, they only did one type of fat and they completely eliminated all other sources of nutrition and macronutrients, including carbohydrates and proteins. So when we have a ketogenic diet, you have a little bit more composition to the diet and variety in the fatty acid chain length. And what the authors are speculating is that this variety of fatty acid chain length is actually might be why it's able to reduce the pro-inflammatory microbes to thus elicit the beneficial impacts that we see on epilepsy and reducing seizures. So sorry, that was kind of a lot. I'm going to start skipping through a bunch more because a lot of this I go in depth in the course for. But basically, what we know so far, mouse data is suggesting that in terms of saturated fatty acids, milk fat, butter, palm oil will be reducing microbial diversity. And then along with omega-6 rich polyunsaturated fatty acids will create a pro-inflammatory environment similar to the milk, fat, and the butter that we just talked about. On the opposite side, the good stuff, the omega-3 rich polyunsaturated fatty acids will be involved more in the prevention of metabolic syndromes by reducing inflammation. Again, trans fats, we know, not good for us. Interestingly, long-term CLA consumption could be detrimental. There's a study out there that is suggesting this, but interestingly, the study also showed that probiotics and prebiotics may balance out those negative effects of the CLA consumption. So there's a lot we don't know, but what we do know, next slide please, is that monounsaturated fatty acids and omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids should be encouraged to help regulate and reduce inflammation. Omega-3 consumption typically should be seen in 1 to 2 grams per day at a ratio of 2 to 1 EPA to DHA, which will again decrease the production of inflammatory cytokines and ROS during exercise, specifically if we are talking about here athletes, which is kind of what I go into more in the course. I talk about more about the stress of exercise on the gut and how it modulates the gut, inflammatory markers, and mechanisms of inflammation of exercise. But anyways, back to fats. Medium chain triglycerides, MCT oils, we know, if you remember from your MNT classes, are more readily absorbed by intestinal cells, and they're often used in digestive and metabolic abnormalities due to these unique properties. So MCTs, which are saturated fatty acid, they may be more beneficial to include in the diet due to their antimicrobial properties, but again, we don't really know. Moving on to carbs. Just like fats, just like proteins, the amount and type of carbohydrate will affect your gut microbiota differently. Lacey? Thanks. Will affect them differently. So just like I just talked about the fats, we have the different fatty acid chain lengths and proteins I will talk about, but just like those, the amount of carbohydrates you eat and the type of carbohydrates you eat will impact the gut microbiota differently. So this is just giving you an overview of all the different types of carbohydrates that there are. Lacey, next slide. The most important one that I want to talk about briefly is just resistant starch. It's a non-digestible carbohydrate. We know there are 4 types, RS1 to RS4. This is giving you an overview of the different types, their traits and digestibilities, where they're found. Overall, the reason why we want more resistant starch in our diet is because this is what feeds the microbiome and the healthy bacteria, and it's associated with, potato starch, the resistant starch is associated with numerous beneficial metabolic outcomes as a result of it feeding bacteria that then produce butyrate and a lot of short-chain fatty acids, which help with lowering inflammation and the integrity of the cell wall and lining of the gut. So resistant starch is a good thing, is a good carbohydrate. We want to include more. Where are the sources of this? Again, a lot of the plant-based things you see, legumes, potatoes. One of the ones that I really enjoy personally, I don't know about anyone else, but I cooked and cooled rice and potatoes. So if you cook potatoes on Sunday and meal prep them and stick them in the fridge, the resistant starch, actually the type of starch changes and becomes less degradable and is more beneficial for the microbiome actually. So similarly to that, the rice and anything that's soaked and sprouted, you can see in the chart. Moving on to proteins. So just like everything else, all the different types of proteins will have different effects on the microbiome. There's one human study where they did 3 weeks of isocaloric supplementation with different types of protein, soy, casein, or maltodextrin, which is a carbohydrate. It had no impact on the gut microbiota, but altered bacterial metabolite production. So again, basically what you eat and will affect the metabolites that the bacteria are producing. Compared to maltodextrin, the carb, both soy and casein caused a decrease in fecal butyrate, which the authors suggest is probably a combination of an increase in the protein intake and a decrease in the indigestible carbohydrate intake. Again, in the course I go more into this. There's even a position paper I talk about that reviews high protein diets on metabolic and gut-related health parameters, including gut microbiota interactions. But generally, we know that high protein diets are associated with decreased body weight, improvement in blood metabolic parameters, and modified bacterial metabolites and co-metabolites in fecal and urinary contents. We've seen that it's beneficial in plant protein and detrimental in animal protein. Again, I have to say this is most likely due to the fact that plant proteins often have some good fibers in them and animal proteins don't. And just like I talked about, the fibers and the carbs and the resistant starches, those are what's feeding the beneficial bacteria. So in my opinion, it's a little biased. But anyways. So last but not least, let's just talk about some toxins. Number one, first and foremost, smoking, most obvious, disrupts the epithelial barrier, increases intestinal inflammation, and will shift the microbiome. Again, it's a increased prevalence of harmful bacteria with those who smoke. And interestingly, if you stop smoking, after you've been smoking for a while, your microbiome can kind of, like Lacey talked about, it can re-inoculate into having more microbial diversity in order to have a healthier microbiome. So your hope isn't lost if you were a smoker and you stopped smoking. Just make sure to stop smoking at the end of the day. Air pollution, interestingly, increases risk of IBD as well. So if you live in a city, making sure kind of just to take precautions. I have a HEPA filter set up in my home to make sure that it's filtering my air quality is good, as well as my water filter. So I have a reverse osmosis system set up as well. And in the course, we can go into that, and I can send out links if people are more interested in that. Poor hygiene is preventative of IBD, which I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with this, but we talk about it in the course about how your gut develops over the course of your lifetime. And if you're exposed to poor hygiene as a child, your microbiome is a little bit, and immune system is a bit more resilient and aware and capable of this stress moving forward. So although we don't want to introduce toxins at a young age or throughout the life, if you're exposed to acute stages of it, it may actually be preventative. And last but not least, you guys know alcohol upsets the stomach. If you don't know, I'm surprised, because it's really hard to drink a lot and not have an upset stomach. So chronic alcohol consumption is, of course, associated with dysbiosis and bacterial overgrowth. So next slide, please. The toxin, this is just an example of how dysbiosis goes to disease. So we're exposed to this toxin. It'll disrupt the intestinal microbiota. It'll increase the amount of oxidative stress burden within our organs and intestines. Specifically, if we talk about the gut, this is disrupting the tight junctions and increasing permeability. And now all of these toxins can leach into the system and create from what once was kind of disclosed within our intestine may be able to pass, we've kind of broken this barrier and now allowed for a pro-inflammatory effect throughout the body. And again, this inflammation in the body, thus you're able and more susceptible to have diseases. So in summary, we talked about fats, the fats that were good, Lacey. The fats that were good were the monounsaturated fats and the omega-3 to regulate inflammation. MCT oils may have an antimicrobial effect. Again, it's the variety of it's the variety of fatty acid chain length that we want to see. The variety. I can't emphasize this enough. Remember the ketogenic diet study that I talked about. It's the variety, not necessarily having all of this or all of that, but we want to make sure we're having a lot of omega-3s and monounsaturated fatty acids, but also including some of those saturated fatty acids like the MCTs. And just like we want variety in fats, we want variety in carbohydrates with a focus on complex non-digestible carbohydrates, again for the butyrate and the short-chain fatty acid production to increase the microbial diversity and feed those good gut bacteria. Lastly, proteins. Low animal protein and high plant protein diet may have a more beneficial impact on the gut microbiota from what the data is suggesting right now. However, in my opinion, I think it's really all about balance, and I think that it's about if you're able to get in those fibers through your carbohydrate source and have a higher animal protein diet, that is completely fine. Again, it's about balance, it's about variety, it's about switching things up. Variety is your best friend when it comes to the gut. So thank you guys so much for listening. We're going to open up now to a Q&A session quickly with Lacey. So if you guys have any questions, we'll answer like a few questions. We don't want to go into too much probably right now just because the course will cover a lot more.
So Rachel, it's not a specific amount of grams of carbohydrates.
Lacey, we can't hear you too well.
Oh, I didn't have my mic on. I'm so sorry.
That's better.
Okay, so we don't know in the literature the amount of specific carbohydrates that are needed for T4 to T3 conversion, but we do know the brain needs about 130 grams of glucose, 130 grams of carbohydrate. So I like to say, at least having 100 grams of carbs a day is a safe zone. I like to say 130 is actually a safe zone. So Something I forgot to mention though, before I dove into my own thyroid slides, is you will see a lot of people have hypothyroidism because they're under eating. So keep that in mind. They might have induced their own hypothyroidism. Under eating, over exercising, stuff like that. Okay, Sarah. T4 is low, TSH is normal. That's subclinical hypothyroidism. Next steps. Yeah, I would definitely rule out Hashimoto's because then there is protocols that you will want to try and do, aka like taking away the gluten, the soy, the dairy. I would also making sure you have done a full panel for nutrition deficiencies. Look at your gut, look at stress, look at your history for sure. Also get a full panel for estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEAS, because DHEAS being low will tell you that there's inflammation. Because inflammation will inhibit the sulfation.
Someone asked earlier about reheating like the potatoes and the rices and starches. So I believe there is actually a study that specifically says that took white rice, cooled it, and then microwaved it. I believe it's just as, I think you have to eat it cooled versus reheating it will break down the fibers again because the heat is what breaks it down and then the coolness is what forms the other fibers. So just want to touch on that.
I know that if you cook the potatoes, then cool them, and then cook them and then cool them again, you have even more resistant starch made, which is really cool.
Just do it all day.
I can imagine though, like after so many times, it would taste and the texture would be god awful. Okay, so how do you determine if a person is in need of enzymes, bile acids, etc.? So the first thing I do is just trial and error. So I will have them just add in digestive enzymes and see if they feel. So if you give them more and more and more, and then they finally get that burning feeling, that's how you know that you've reached too much or enough for them. You can use data. Some people who have low pancreatic enzymes, of course, you're going to look at pancreatic tests too. But for the most part, I like using trial and error.
And also, I just want to add that clinically speaking, only digestive enzymes that are prescribed by your doctor have been shown to have efficacy in modulating and enhancing digestion. The over-the-counter ones likely are more of a placebo effect. So if anything, some people say like swear by them. Some people may just have also added other factors. So they might have started taking the digestive enzymes over the counter, but have also implemented bitters or other little homeopathic things. So just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so the oils that are high temperature that are healthy, we put a whole list up, but I personally love using olive oil and coconut oil. So those would be my top two favorites.
The one that I would recommend the most is avocado oil.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Now, physicians, I do not suggest the ketogenic diet for anybody who has a hypothyroidism or Hashimoto disease. Definitely. Are there any specific tests that can determine if birth control is contributing to gut imbalances in SIBO? No, you would have to do tests for looking at the gut imbalances in SIBO itself. So you couldn't necessarily say, hey, this is my birth control that did that, if that makes sense. Any contraindications for enzymes or betaine? Yes. Specifically, you're going to want to look at what people are taking with medications, supplements, and then their history. So you got to look into things like ulcers, stomach ulcers. Are there any other questions that we had?
Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I hope you guys were able to learn more. Oh, the Renew Life, my favorite, Renew Life Ultimate Flora 50 billion. I personally use the 30 billion, but the 50 billion is also awesome as well. If any of you guys are practitioners, the best thing that you can do is use Full Script. It is incredible. So it's got all these GMP regulated supplements, almost like pharmaceutical-based supplements that only practitioners can sell, and it allows you to send them to your clients. So I love using that.
So Lacey, why don't we wrap it up, and why don't you talk about the exclusive pre-sale pricing of this and inclusions that they're getting with tomorrow's email?
Yeah. So you guys, you will get an email not tonight or hopefully in the next week or so with information with the slides as well as the recording if you want to go over it, and then the CEU. And then in regards to the pre-sale, so we are offering Exposing the Root. This was literally just a tidbit of the information that will be in the course. Our course has over 200 references. It is long. It is grueling. I know Dasha and I have both put our heart and soul into this online course. So if you are still a practitioner or you are somebody who's struggling with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, this is literally the course for you, and there's nothing like it on the market. There really is not. So it's going to tell you everything to T4 to T3 conversion, what the thyroid is, what affects the thyroid, lifestyle modification, supplements, lab work to do, the whole shebang. Okay, so it gets really into the nitty gritty. We're offering that for $249, and that is going to last up until Black Friday, and then it is gone. And the price goes significantly up because, God, this course is worth a lot more than $249. A lot more.
Yeah, it's like really, it's bad how much more it's worth. Oh,
Yeah.
well. Oops.
Literally, we started making this course in June and put our heart and soul into it and edited
it's not even the course. It's the fact that there's the course, and then there's like all the other supplemental things, like 50-page recipe books that we're throwing in with like health questionnaires, like so much journals and things like that. Like, you will not be disappointed. I will tell you that.
Free meal plan, 5-day meal plan for your thyroid. Sorry, my cat she wants to say hello. Okay. So there's just endless things. You get discounted calls with me as a dietitian if you are somebody who needs help. But just, it's been great. I hope you guys have been able to learn and enjoy this. The emails, we have you, as long as you signed up for the webinar, we have your emails. We'll send everything out to you. If we do not, then you still are able to go on my website, go through my link in my bio for my Instagram, which is at Faith and Fit. Just make sure that you are on the pre-sale list, and you will get the webinar slides and you will get the recording, and then we will email out the CEU.
And I just posted in the group chat the link to the webinar sign up. So if you aren't signed up but somehow got here anyways, you can sign up to the webinar, and you'll be on that email list to get the recording.
Well, that was really easy. Thanks, Dasha.
No problem.
Well, great. Does anybody have any last minute questions for us?
Thank you all. Thank you, Lacey. This is so awesome and fun.
I know. I love it. And thank you guys for dealing with the sound effects. I know it can be quite confusing with working a webinar. This was actually our first webinar, so success.
Woohoo.
Yee. All righty. Well, that is it. I hope you guys have a fabulous rest of your week. You get through the time change. And if you have any questions, we both have a lot of more info on our social media handles. Dasha's at Dasha Fitness, and then I am at Faith and Fit on Instagram. And then that's about it. Thank you guys.